This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Well, we'll see how things go with this one. This was not the most ideal time to have to be calling in maintenance workers to fix household problems, but hey, Fridays are really my only full days off, so I'm working with what I got, which is really not a whole lot to begin with. So if you hear what appear to be either power drills or earthquake rumblings in the background, note that it is not the end of the world. It's just very loud, obnoxious equipment. So hopefully we can ignore that and proceed with the podcast, because we've got a good amount of stuff to talk about today, including what might have been one of my favorite episodes of Dynamite I've seen in quite some time, actually. I can assure you that it was miles better than that abortion of a SmackDown episode I saw 1 week ago, wherein by the time it was over, I was about ready to go outside and kick some dogs. There was not anything on this week's Dynamite that I watched where I was left seething with rage, although Jericho's segment was annoying and rotten beyond all hope. But I'll get to that in a minute, because my Dynamite viewing this week was a little bit different than usual. I also had a not-so-fun time getting my setup to watch the retro content, which you will hear me vent about later on in the show. There is a story to be had there. In the meantime, though, you're in for a big one this week, so make sure that if you are not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can stay posted with all FSWR content every week. We post uploads on Mondays and Fridays to YouTube and Rumble. I'm doing my best to try to beef up the show with a little more excitement. Trying to get my hands on some quality recording equipment at some point too. Preferably a decent microphone. But still doing some research. You know how things go when you're looking to invest in audio or upgraded recording devices. Millions of things to choose from. A lot of it's garbage. But as I keep researching and looking to see what the best option is, we'll proceed with what we got right now. Appreciate the people that have stuck around to come back and watch the show every week. If you are a new viewer and you're tuning in for the first time, equal thanks. I appreciate any of the support we can get on this channel. I don't do this for a living. I just like coming on here and talking about wrestling with the people. And apparently there are returning viewers that enjoy hearing me discuss it, so it's a give and take situation. Some people will like what I have to say, some people will hate it, and however you perceive it, I just speak my mind, man. Always been a straight shooter. Always will be. Some people have liked that quality in me. Most people I find don't like it. And I'm all right with that, because most of those people are losers anyway. So they keep their distance from me. I keep mine. Small friend groups are the best option to go with, people. Never forget that. Because the more acquaintances you have in life, the easier it is to get stabbed in the back or taken advantage of. There's your life lesson hack for the day. You know who your real friends are. The kinds of people that you would drive an hour and a half one way and back just to drop in and say, hey. You know, the kinds of people that you might disagree with on certain things, but you take a bullet for them in a heartbeat. The ones that you can trust to support you in times of need. When you need them the most, they're always there for you. They're few and far between in this world, but they exist. Trust me. But why don't we go ahead with the wrestling report and save the deep talk for another time? So I took a different approach when it came to the Dynamite program this week. Normally when I watch these shows, I'm constantly trying to take rapid-fire notes. I'm attempting to construct a somewhat coherent breakdown of all the key spots or notable parts of the segments. Or in the case of AEW, the segments that I actually decide to watch. Because there have been a lot of shows in the last several months where I'm finding myself either fast-forwarding through or skipping over most of the crap that doesn't interest me. But here I decided to try something different. I said, I need to eat dinner. I got home late on Thursday night after teaching, and that's normally the time where I actually have the chance to sit down and watch the Dynamite shows on delay, because I know for a fact I'm never going to have time to watch them on Wednesday nights. And sometimes it ends up backfiring on me because, then I catch wind of spoilers or things that happen before I even get a chance to watch the show. However, I don't like eating and using my computer at the same time. So I ate dinner while I watched the first 20 or so minutes of the show. And after that, I said, you know what? Let me just experiment with something. I'm going to watch the show without typing up any notes. I'm still going to skip through some of the stuff that I don't want to see. And after the show's over, I'm going to go back into my notes. I'm going to try to recap the notable things that I remembered. And then I'm just going to try to review the show from a viewpoint of casually watching, I guess. And I can tell you, as someone that has been watching wrestling for a very long time, when you put yourself in the mindset of just watching something versus actively critiquing something while it's happening in the moment, it does shift your perspective a little bit. Instead of trying to rattle off a bunch of shit that happened, instead of trying to type 150 words a minute to keep up with what's happening on screen, sometimes just sitting back and watching things unfold kind of changes the viewing experience. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. Maybe it was just me changing things up with how I watched the show this week. But I found myself liking the show a lot more by taking that approach. This was a huge improvement. I'd even go as far as to say that this was one of the better episodes of Dynamite I can recall in a long time. And again, that's not to say everything on the show was perfect or that, I won't sit here and nitpick certain things that I didn't like about the show. But I can tell you, 100% certainty, I enjoyed this episode of Dynamite. There was some really good stuff on this show. And some of it happening in segments that I really wasn't expecting. And the opener was kind of a prime example of that. When I saw that the opening match on the show was Jon Moxley versus Adam Page, I was like, oh boy, here we go. For reference, you can go back and listen to my recaps of anything involving these guys in the last couple months on television. This was one of those feuds that hasn't really clicked with me from the jump. To this day, I don't think I was ever really able to figure out who the hell I was supposed to cheer or boo in this entire program. In the case of Page, he probably would have been the most logical guy to cheer, considering he was the guy that went down with a concussion in their first match. The problem is this edgy millennial gimmick Page has been doing is one of the dumbest fucking gimmicks I've ever seen. You talk about the epitome of everything that's wrong with modern America today. Pussified, weak men. And Adam Page is trying to make a character out of it. Just think about this coherently for a second. Who the hell would want to cheer for an anxious, nervous, scared cowboy? Is that something that people actually do? Why? Who the fuck wants to see that? I want to see Adam Page ride his horse down to the ring and beat people up. Not walking around sulking in his own misery like he has for the better part of 3 years. It's why I've been so cold on the guy for as long as I have. Every time I see Adam Page, nothing about his presentation on camera screams badass. And this millennial cowboy character is no different. So goddamn stupid. But here's the other issue. If you flip this conversation on its face and say, by extension of everything that has gone down in this program, Moxley should by default be the heel, on the one hand, I might agree with you, but was he the heel? I don't know. And this kind of goes back to my whole discussion of why I've never liked Jon Moxley's ring style or overall presentation. Whether he's a face or a heel, he works the exact same match, does the exact same promo, works the exact same character. Nothing about his presentation changes at all. And you can say the same thing went for Stone Cold Steve Austin, but people, sorry to break this news to you, Jon Moxley ain't fucking Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he never will be, no matter how much he tries to cosplay as him on television. And I think the end result is that you get situations like this where you go into this match where the LA crowd was kind of having a hard time settling on which guy they were supposed to root for. I think I'd say, going by the way the crowd was responding, if I didn't know any better, I'd have assumed Adam Page was the heel and Moxley was the babyface. Because anytime Page was in jeopardy here or tried to fire up on Mox, the crowd wasn't really getting behind him. They were kind of lukewarm. Like they'd pop for spots, because that's what modern fans are trained to do, because, they don't give a shit about good guys and bad guys. All they want to see is moves. It's the unfortunate reality of where we are in today's business. So, I don't know. I was getting conflicting results with whom the established protagonist and antagonist were here. If that even matters at this stage. As a fight, though, if I remove the character equation from the conversation, I liked what I saw. And again, I really did not expect that to be the case here. Mostly because I just don't like Moxley's style of match, and I never have. But this worked. I'll still always hate the back and forth chop spots or the I'm going to hit you as hard as I can with a forearm so that you can fire back and hit me with one and we're just going to stand there and take it sort of deal. I get it's a thing they do in New Japan, but again, newsflash, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that needs to be duplicated here in the States. Just saying. But I like that they went right into the action from the beginning. They didn't waste time. Didn't try to stand there and milk the crowd response before they locked up. They immediately started going after one another. And, I even remember thinking to myself as the match was happening, this has a big fight feel to it. I'm actually getting the sense that these guys have beef with one another and don't like each other. And I think the important detail for me, regardless of my opinions of Page and Mox's workers, for the sake of argument, I can remove that from the equation. Not only did this match come across like two guys having a grudge match, but it also felt like two top guys having a grudge match. Again, I can remove my personal biases about Mox's terrible ring work or Page's stupid gimmicks. From the standpoint of AEW's overall roster, Adam Page and Jon Moxley are main event level guys. Upper mid-card at the very least. And I think we can agree on that, whether or not we want to recognize that to be the case. If I were running a wrestling company personally, I probably would not have these two as my main event level guys, but this isn't my company. However, I can still recognize that in the scope of AEW's product, these two are on that level. It looked like two main event guys having a fight with no belts at stake, just a personal issue to settle. And those are the kinds of stories that I think are missing a lot in pro wrestling anymore, where you just have two main event or upper mid-card level guys that are just looking to settle a score and find out who the better man is. No titles, no caveats, no special additives, just two guys that are on the same level on the card, trying to beat each other up and find out who has more guts. So I can appreciate that in this circumstance, even though I think the build to this feud has been absolutely atrocious. And I'll say this, and I know I'm not the first to bitch about it in the past. Adam Page has got to cut out doing that blind moonsault. He's going to kill himself. I'm telling you. You might think I'm exaggerating, but the day is going to come where he's going to mistime that or land wrong. He's going to break an ankle, fracture a knee, or even worse, in the case of what happened in this match. Did you see how precariously close he came to smacking the back of his neck off the guardrail on the floor? I'm telling you, if he would have over-rotated any more than he did, he would have jerked himself right back against the rail, snapped his neck on the back of the barricade. That would have been curtains for Adam Page's career. That would have been it. He's got to stop doing that move. I know it looks impressive, and I know the people pop for it, but at some point, you got to weigh the risk factor and say, is this really worth the potential of injuring myself or possibly ending my career if I land wrong? Maybe Adam Page doesn't think that far in advance because he's a millennial, and we all know millennials don't really have a reputation for thinking that far in advance about virtually anything. But in the end, I like that they kept the intensity alive. It never sagged. The match didn't drag. The people stayed with it for the whole match. And, while the finish wasn't particularly surprising to see Page go over clean, it's one of those circumstances where you realize Moxley hasn't taken too many pinfalls in AEW. To see him take a clean pinfall loss on television was kind of weird, actually. Mox has been in a weird boat with this company for a long time now. As much as they featured him as a key talent on the show, you look back at a lot of the stuff he's been involved with over the last year and you start wondering to yourself, isn't it kind of sad that Jon Moxley has essentially been AEW's go-to backup option for pretty much when all of their initial plans fell through? I just think it's got to suck to be in that situation where you were never the guy that they were planning on making the world champion or making the top priority on the card. But it all ends up kind of being right place, right time, where Punk gets hurt. Who's the backup option? Jon Moxley. Then you do the rematch on pay-per-view. Moxley immediately drops the strap back to Punk when he comes back from the first injury. They try to proceed forward as the initial plans were intended. Punk gets hurt again. And there's all the drama with the media scrum deal, companies in shambles internally. So who's the backup option to put the belt back on in the interim? Jon Moxley. Also, he could carry the belt forward to drop it to MJF, which was originally designed to be Punk's spot. It's like... I mean, at some point you got to ask yourself, doesn't it suck always being viewed as number two? The guy considered to be a good hand. The guy that you'll always fall back on when things don't go according to plan, but you know deep down secretly that you were never really designated for that spot to begin with. I mean, Lord knows I've been in those secondhand spots before, especially in a work environment. It's not a particularly rewarding position to be in. Unless you're just content with being in the second spot, which maybe Moxley is. I don't have that mindset. Never have. But maybe for Moxley, he's fine with being the backup option. Got to give it to him, being a good sport and stepping up when the company needed him the most. Rumor has it that he's been putting off vacation time, which, my God, is that just fucking ridiculous? In the world of wrestling, we're talking about guys needing vacation time. Oh my God. I just think, what would the old timers say to that? They'd be asking themselves, what the hell has this business come to? But, looking at the end result here, maybe this was their way of writing him off television for a while, so maybe he can take time to recover a little bit. The guy's been a pretty consistent part of the TV show for well over 3 years now. I know there was that brief period where he was gone doing rehab, but that was only a few months. I don't think we've seen an extensive period where Moxley just wasn't on the show or being factored in somehow. So if they are writing him off television and we don't see him for a while, well, on the one hand, that'll be good news for me. We'll see how things reflect on the ratings end going forward. As for Paige, I have no idea what's next on the agenda for him. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it doesn't involve any affiliation with the Job Order and or the Elite. Although, judging by what happened in the next segment, there might be something that eventually ties those two together on screen. And going back to what I mentioned at the start of the review, how sometimes with watching these shows on delay, I get notifications or news breaks on things that happen before I even get a chance to sit down and see it take place. This is kind of one of those unfortunate spoilers because, and I don't know if I've really mentioned this on the podcast at all, but I was really thinking about this over the last month or so, watching these shows take place and seeing the current state of the roster right now. I don't remember specifically when it started, but I just remember I thought to myself during one of these shows one time, who are some of the guys that I would actually kind of like to see back on the show again? And while I've been fairly critical of a lot of the crap he's been associated with since he came in, there was a part of me that was like, I really miss Adam Cole. I hope he's doing well. I hope he's recovering. I hope he's taking the time to get himself in better ring shape, taking the time to heal up from all those injuries that piled up on him early last year. It's been a rough road for him. And sure enough, while a lot of this stuff is sort of entering my mind, who should wind up making his return but the devil himself? No, I'm not talking about MJF, for the record. He came out later. But yeah, Adam Cole made his big return here after, God, I don't even know how long. It's had to have been well over 7 months. I mean, it's been so long, I can't even recall the last thing I remember seeing Cole involved with before he went away for all that time. I remember there was the match where he got that really bad concussion and they basically had to abruptly end the match right there after all that went down. I think that was right around the time, too, where he was dealing with a shoulder problem. But I'll say this. He came out here, got a huge ovation from the crowd. He looked good from what I saw. Probably could have had someone help him out with the spray tan a little bit because he was looking a little orange there, especially in the hands. But, especially when they were doing those close-ups, I could even tell in the face that he just looked less bloated. Kind of hard to tell what his physical state is since he had street clothes on here. Guess we'll find out what he looks like when he takes his shirt off. But he cut a damn fine promo. He was a total babyface here, and the spotlight was solely on him. There was no Omega, there were no Bucks, no Hangman Page, obviously no Fish and O'Reilly. It was just Adam Cole solo. Talked about everything that's gone down with him in the last year, the health complications, the fact that he used to wake up at like 3 or 4 in the morning with Britt asking him what's wrong and Cole not being able to explain what's happening to him. Said there was a time where he couldn't even be in a car for more than 15 minutes before he started feeling nauseous. But even through all those trials and tribulations, the thing that stuck with him the most is that with everything that's gone down, he would still get messages and read the fan response on social media, talking about the people that say, even if they don't care if Adam Cole ever wrestles again, they just want him to be okay. They just want him to be healthy again. And talks about how that meant the world to him. Said that he had good news and bad news when he showed up at the building today. And the good news is that he's doing better on his road to recovery. But the bad news is not, in fact, for Adam Cole. It is for everybody on the AEW roster. He says he's not done wrestling yet. Not even close. He's only scratching the surface of what he can accomplish in AEW. And he promises that his end goal will be to make it to the top of the mountain as the AEW World Champion. At which point I said to myself, well, if you stay away from the childish antics and doing jobs to the company mascot, we might have something on this second go-around. And again, it looks like it's going to be a babyface run for him for the foreseeable future. And I think that actually might work for the better instead of trying to go against the grain and fight the crowd. Because I'm also trying to think from a standpoint of MJF is going to need some world title challengers down the road. Once he wraps up the program with Danielson, I could see them starting something between Cole and MJF over the title headed into the summer. I don't think Cole winning the world title needs to necessarily happen, but there's definitely some mileage to get out of that program. I mean, the promos alone between both guys I think would be enough to sell the feud. Again, though, I just hope Cole's doing the work to get himself in better ring shape. Picking up weights, training, doing some cardio, what have you. Because if he's going to be factored into a program with MJF, the size thing is still going to be an issue, especially if Cole's physique still isn't good. I'm not saying he needs to come out next time I see him with a fucking perfect V-taper, but some sort of body definition. Broader shoulders, bigger arms, bigger chest. I mean, he still looks like he's been skipping out on leg day. So, again, we'll kind of play this one by ear and see whether or not getting back on the Adam Cole bandwagon is going to be worth it. I'll say this. I'm already cautiously optimistic with the fact that they just let Adam go out there by himself. No one coming out to interrupt him. Nobody to immediately hit the ring and lay him out like a dork. They let him be the center of attention. They let him say his piece, and it works so much better. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this about Adam Cole, but we talked about the difference between him and NXT versus his AEW run. I think one of the biggest problems for Adam Cole when he came in is they immediately tried to shoehorn him into a faction again. I mean, Adam Cole works in units like that, but he's got to be the center of attention. He works so much better when he's the spotlighted guy in the group. And I really wasn't getting that vibe when they were doing the whole thing with him and the Beta Bucks and the Undisputed Era at the same time. It was just too much of a schmoz. Couldn't really tell who was the leader of the group or who was supposed to be the focal point. So it kind of detracted from Adam Cole's appeal. But when I saw him out here by himself and he was the only one out there, he looked like a bigger star. Came across like a bigger deal on TV. And I got those NXT main event vibes with him again. And I really wasn't getting that with him for the better part of the last year and a half. So I like this segment. And I'm glad to see Adam Cole's back. Hopefully healthier and hopefully taking a more serious approach to his ring worth. Or ring work. Self-worth, too. Kind of jumble those two terms together, but yeah, they go hand in hand. Just anything to disassociate himself from the trampoline play kids. I don't need to see Adam Cole involved with Kenny Omega or the Beta Bucks or the fucking Job Order or any of those idiots. Just let Adam Cole be himself. Let him stand out on his own. He doesn't need anybody. Bobby Fish is gone, so you don't have to worry about him anymore. Kyle O'Reilly, the jury's still out on whether or not he's ever going to be back. So in the meantime, this is their prime opportunity to really do some serious damage control with this guy. I'm holding on to hope. Like I said, I really like Adam Cole. I don't have anything against the guy. He was one of my favorite guys to watch under that old Hunter regime in NXT. Again, we can talk about some of the details about his stature or his physique or whatever. We can have that conversation until we're blue in the face. If he's putting in the work, if he's going to the gym, if he's doing a better job of getting himself in shape, then I have nothing against seeing Adam Cole being spotlighted in a main event picture again. But if they start throwing him back into the comedy club, it's going to be a different conversation. So that's where I stand with things right now. Still on the fence, but I'm not willing to roll out Adam Cole as a potential guy that can be saved. Moving along here, though. The next match was Lee Moriarty and not Big Cass versus a team name that I never want to hear articulated again for as long as I live. I'm going to say this once so that hopefully I never have to repeat it again because it's that cringe. Jungle Hook? Ugh, God damn it, I just threw up in my mouth. Jungle Boy and Hook. We'll go with that. Or Hook Boy. I like Hook Boy better. So, well, going by the theme of this review, where I'm mostly just trying to report on the important details, aside from me nearly having a seizure over hearing them actually call their team Jungle Hook, more seriously, here's my question. Why did they bother breaking up the Jurassic Express if they were just going to turn around and throw Jungle Boy back into another makeshift team? I personally would like to know where the hell Christian Cage and Luchasaurus vanished off to since the whole feud ended. But it's like, how productive is it to break up a team just to have them feud, only to wind up putting the babyface back into another tag team? Isn't that usually the kiss of death when it comes to figuring out whether or not a guy is ever going to stand out on his own? I mean, I know the bloom's kind of off the rose with Jungle Boy at this point, but I'm just asking. The match here wasn't bad or anything. I still don't give a shit about anything involving the firm at this point, and Big Cass is a prime example of a guy that works so much better when he had a super charismatic loudmouth as a side piece. I mean, look, y'all want to shit on Enzo Amore. He's definitely not a saint when it comes to the wrestling business. But don't ever deny that he was the only reason that tag team ever got over in the first place. The only reason Cass ever had any traction to begin with. That tag team was all Enzo. I look at this guy on his own. The only thing I see is about 7 feet of drywall. As for Jungle Boy and Hook as a tag team, to me it's like, whatever. I can kind of take it or leave it if I'm being honest. Personally, I just don't think it's a good use of either guy. Hook is also another example of a guy that is much more effective when he's on his own and just kind of doing his own thing. You know, beating up geeks in short order. I mean, he's got the kind of personality or appeal to where he really only kind of works as a singles guy. As soon as you put him in a tag team equation and he's not the center of attention, he just comes off as a guy. And I hate to say it, but that's basically what Hook looked like in this match. He was a guy amidst a sea of 4 other guys. I mean, there was some clumsiness in terms of execution of spots. Hook and Jungle Boy tried some double team spots that kind of looked like they weren't on the same page. You know, the spot at the end where Hook gave Cass the overhead T-bone suplex was kind of cool. Got a big reaction. And like a minute later, Jungle Boy tapped out Moriarty with the snare trap. Like I said, it wasn't a bad match or anything. I didn't hate it. I'm just questioning the logic of this booking strategy of pairing 2 singles guys together when they might be better served on their own instead of getting shoehorned into a tag team. I mean, we all saw what happened the last time they tried to stick Hook with a tag partner. They instantly killed his steam. Because then they tried to involve him with that fucking Danhausen stuff. That was death TV. Anytime those two were together on screen. I mean, I think I more so enjoy this match for the peak comedy of Tony Schiavone's massive brain fart. I think this was a match where Tony was trying to do one of his rambling escapades, and there was a point in his conversation where he just sort of petered out and stopped talking, and Taz started laughing at this, making mention of the fact that Tony just stopped his train of thought midway through. And then under his breath, while everyone's laughing to themselves, Tony just goes, "I thought we were in picture-in-picture." Ugh. The WCW train wreck moments that still live to this day. Tony Schiavone in the year 2023, still completely phoning it in and having zero idea of his whereabouts. Some things never change. I still love Tony. Speaking of Danhausen and crew, they were in the follow-up segment that I also immediately fast-forwarded through. Took one look at that and said, nope. I was still relatively enjoying the program up to this point. I was not about to let these dingbats ruin it. So that took me over to the top of the hour match with Bryan Danielson and Konosuke Takeshita. He's back. Apparently. And the jokes of the last name pronunciation still write themselves. Even MJF made mention of it when he came out for his promo. So, well, first of all, let me kind of run down what happened in this segment before I give my overall take on what I liked and what I didn't like. It was kind of 50-50 split here. As far as the promo deal goes, you know, MJF comes down before Danielson's intro, and I couldn't really tell what the Chiron said when he was coming down, but you know how when they put up the name graphics on screen, they'll have that little top section where they put the brief description of the guy or girl coming down to the ring? It'll have like an attribute or something. It'll say like world champion, or sometimes it'll point out something about their record or whatever. Here, I think it just flat out read something to the extent of trying to get out of having to wrestle Bryan Danielson at Revolution. So even the production team has heat with this guy. That was awesome. And he gets in there, starts immediately running down to Kesha, including making the jokes about his name sounding like Take a Shitta. Because, you know, it's spelled exactly like that. At least the American version of it. He's in there mocking the fact that he's heard so many great things about him, even though MJF has never actually taken the time to watch any of it. Because when MJF goes back to play the shows, he usually skips to the parts of the shows that matter the most, that being pretty much anything he's involved with. Sounds like me talking. And they did the brief little angle where Takeshita yelled for MJF to kiss his ass in Japanese. They tried to have him confront MJF, but somehow Max was able to have Aubrey Edwards hold him back under penalty of being fined, which I guess MJF now has the power to do all of a sudden. I can't really explain what was going on there. But while Takeshita is just standing outside the ring like a jackass, twiddling his thumbs, MJF just proceeds forward with the promo. They made an effort to not put the camera on Takeshita at any point, so it makes me wondering what the hell he was actually doing on the floor. But MJF's making jokes about the celebrities that showed in attendance, Ken Jeong, Freddie Prinze Jr., to which I thought to myself, boy, is Ken ever ready to hop the rail and beat the fuck out of this guy. That little exchange where Max was running him down and Ken standing there with that glare, I thought, this guy's about to hit the ring, isn't he? Of course, there's no security there to hold him back, so chances are he would have had a clear shot to the ring. Freddie Prinze Jr. was more so blowing it off like, yeah, this shit's fake. We all know it. Give me a break. Although the line about his most famous moment being the time he played a second fiddle character to a CGI dog, that got me. And finally, after like 5 minutes of all this, MJF running down the fans, running down Take a Shitta, and running down the two celebrities in the building. Then Bryan Danielson finally interrupts and starts giving chase to MJF. Where the hell was Danielson at in the previous 5 minutes? Why did he wait for MJF to get all that out before he decided, all right, now I must run to the ring and send MJF for the hills? That was weird. And then they had the match with Danielson and Takeshita, which was good. Although I still had some lingering questions about the way this was all laid out. First off, they set up last week that in order for Danielson to get the title shot at Revolution, he has to win every match on TV from now until February 8th. Okay, got it. That's fine. Who's picking the opponents for him? Is it MJF? Is it Tony Khan? I don't think they ever really explained that. But it's important because if we're to buy that MJF is the one handpicking Danielson's opponents, can you explain the logic of him wanting to pick a babyface to wrestle him? Wouldn't it be wiser for MJF to try to find like a mean, rugged, tough heel for Danielson to have to go through? That way there's also the added suspense of MJF doing everything to stack the deck against Danielson. Trying to have him work against heels that are going to be more in favor of MJF to try and prevent Danielson from getting the title shot, to screw him over. I'm just thinking about this. I don't understand how Konosuke Takeshita having a competitive match with Bryan Danielson is stacking the deck. Because there's no suspense with a match like this. We all know Danielson's winning. Which kind of brings me to my second issue with this. Why was this match so competitive? And I know I bring this up all the time when it comes to the way AEW structures matches, but in this context, Bryan Danielson is supposed to be their top babyface at the moment. Takeshita is an underneath enhancement talent that, to my recollection, has yet to win a TV match. Okay, maybe he won a few matches on Dark. Fuck you, doesn't matter. Talking about the main prime television show. We've seen a lot of Takeshita matches on Dynamite. Has he won a single match? He's been competitive with guys, but has he actually won? I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. I agree. I fully agree with that conversation. What the fuck is that? Oh boy, are we leaving that in. That is a memory for the ages there. Sounded like me trying to squeeze out a fart while I was walking away from the girls segment. Okay, so getting back on topic here. Why in the hell is it taking Danielson almost 15 full minutes to beat a guy that should be nowhere near his level on the card? Again, maybe to the modern fans, this stuff doesn't matter. But to me, as a longtime wrestling fan that has watched this business over a 25-plus year period, this matters to me. I know we get sucked into the idea that it's all about the moves, but card structure and rational match layout are very important. Even if you had these guys go like 5 minutes with Takeshita maybe getting like a flash roll-up or two, you could still make that work. Because at that point, we're still establishing by the end that Bryan Danielson is the man, and he's just working through MJF's little charade so that he can get the title shot. But having these guys go almost 15 minutes with Danielson in jeopardy and working from underneath at various points, with two babyfaces no less, all you're doing here is signifying that these guys are on an even playing field. And that's not really enticing me to want to see Danielson wrestle MJF in a 60-minute Iron Man match. Shouldn't the idea be to explicitly point out the fact that Danielson can win matches in short order so that we can demonstrate how quickly Danielson can rack up pins or submissions? He goes in there, beats Takeshita in 5 minutes, and now you're like, oh shit. Well, how's MJF supposed to survive 60 minutes with the guy if Danielson can get a pinfall in under 10? By the end of this thing, Danielson's going to have like 17 pinfall wins over MJF. I don't know. There's just too many things about the way this is laid out that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, if you remove all that from the equation, I like the match for what it was. I don't have anything against this Konosuke Takeshita dude. I just don't care about him because he never wins matches. They've established that to be the case now. So even if he can hypothetically have competitive matches with the main event guys, again, if he never wins anything, does that really matter? Isn't the whole point in sports competition to win? Not putting up a hell of a fight only to fall short in the end? I mean, a win's a win and a loss is a loss. You can't really work your way around that point. If Takeshita had some underneath matches on TV before they got to this point, perhaps the circumstances would be a little different. But because of the fact that I know the dude never wins, period, when I see him having competitive back and forth matches with the main event level guys, I just don't buy it. I just think it drags down the main eventer by comparison because it's lowering him to his level. He's got a good look. He's got size. He's got a little bit of personality, and the people seem to like him. So why not run with that? Sign the guy if they haven't done so already, but more importantly, feature the guy on TV every week. Give him wins. Let him rack up a few points so that we're given a reason to take him seriously. I mean, the people already watching this product are going to like him regardless. So you're not trying to appeal to those fans. What about the so-called casual fans? Or the people that maybe would like to see a little bit more of the guy, but they're not quite behind him because they haven't been given a reason to. There are those people to take into consideration, Tony. I know that's not the way you like the book. My guess is this will probably be the last time we see Takeshita in about 8 months when they decide to book him again and have him lose again. In the meantime, I guess he'll be taking a shitta in the background and not being of any consequence to the show. Speaking of taking a shitta, that is exactly what I did during the next match. And I'm sorry to say, even at this point, even involving Paige in a women's match on AEW TV, it ain't going to be enough to get me to sit through one of these. It was her and Toni Storm versus Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter. Hikaru Shida did something at the end to fuck over the babyfaces, even though they're all friends supposedly. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who's on what side. All I know is that if you held a gun to my head and told me to name who the actual women's champion was in this segment based on everything they did here, I still don't think I would have gotten it right to save my life. The attention was on Shida, Paige, and Toni Storm, and whatever the hell's going on in their saga, none of whom I believe are the actual champions because I think it's Jamie Hayter. Meanwhile, I'm still contemplating why the hell Jamie and Britt are still friends when they've been teasing that split for like 7 years. Again, how the hell anyone would have been able to figure out who the champion was after watching that, I don't know. But the women's division in AEW has been a mystery to me since the very beginning. Also, something else that continues to be a mystery to me, why AEW Rampage is still a thing. I had totally forgotten that show existed for the longest time. Judging by the ratings, I can't say I'm the only one. But, hey, at least we know who the relegated guys are at this point. The ones that don't apparently make the cut for the Dynamite programming. I don't think Eddie Kingston has made a single on-screen appearance on Dynamite in months. Now, yeah, he was on the show here in a pre-tape with Ortiz, but inside the actual venue at the building? How long has it been? And then I saw Kingston and Ortiz here, and I was like, remember when these guys were like one of the most heavily featured dudes on the show? Remember when Chris Jericho said he was going to make Santana and Ortiz big stars? Or that he was going to do great business with Kingston? And like, none of that ever happened? Interesting. Very interesting. Very nice. Very evil. It's almost like Chris Jericho's mission in AEW is to single-handedly ensure the demise of anybody that starts to gain any bit of traction. Take, for example, Ricky Starks. So 1 week ago, he beats Jericho clean in the middle of the ring, which was then immediately ruined by him getting laid out like a dweeb and powerbombed through a table. So now, not only is Starks getting shoehorned into all this JAS nonsense, but now he is getting saddled with this fucking Action Audrey jerk-off. The 150-pound generic indie guy that looks like he got kicked out of the college frat group. Because if Jericho's going to work with Ricky Starks, can't just be Ricky Starks that gets the central focus of the storyline. They got to throw this fucking idiot in there to muddy things up. And not only are they now involving Audrey with everybody in this group, not only are they trying to make this guy a main event player, but my God, they're giving him a live microphone. Please, for the love of God, AEW, for the sake of my sanity and everybody else watching, don't do that again. Yeah, this was painfully bad. Between the JAS members in there with those stupid purple outfits on, everybody coming across like low-rent comedy characters, talking about their PWG invasion that no one gives a crap about, Action Audrey doing the most painfully scripted promo delivery of all time, bantering back and forth with Daniel fucking Garcia of all people. Yeah, that's a promo battle for the ages. Live TV, folks. Let's have Action Audrey and Daniel Garcia go one-on-one on the mic. Cruising for a bruise in there. My God. Even Ricky couldn't save this thing. All so they could set up next week Ricky Starks versus Jake Hager. Of all the Jagoffs in the Jagoff Asshole Society, of all the dudes to have Ricky Starks wrestle, they chose Jake Hager. The ultimate epitome of a dude that is milking a paycheck at this point. Must be nice. Seriously, to be one of the most useless people on this entire roster and you're still probably making six figures each year. All because you're friends with the right people. Got to make sure he keeps his job. Even though he's proven to be of absolutely no consequence to any of AEW's overall bottom line. So yeah, that is a match for next week. I can see the viewership skyrocketing as we speak. The ratings are through the roof for Ricky Starks versus Jake Hager. And sorry to say, but even him trying to rip off Owen's classic line about kicking Brett's leg out from under his leg, saying that he's going to slap Ricky's face off his face, very unfunny. Mostly because it sounded very deliberate and unnatural. Also because it's Jake Hager and no one gives two fucks about that bland piece of raw meat. Christ almighty. The show wasn't perfect. Best Dynamite episode I've seen in a long time. It was not a 5-star classic. And at that point, I think I pretty much saw everything I needed to. Because the only thing that was left was the main event, which was the final round in the best of 7 with the Elite and Death Triangle. Whatever this Escalera de Cirque du Soleil bullshit was. Their definition of a car wreck TLC match, because that's what every company does to try and mimic WWE. They take a concept, steal it, rename it, but still comes with all the usual bells and whistles that we all come to expect with modern wrestling. It was also one of the most anticlimactic circumstances you've probably ever seen, because did anyone actually expect for a split second that the Elite was not winning this match? I didn't even need to watch anything in the best of 7 to know how anticlimactic it was all going to be in the end. I mean, if you're a fan of the complete car wreck style of match where people are falling off ladders and damn near trying to kill themselves for no reason, cool. You probably weren't bored watching this, but I knew what it was going to be, and I didn't need to stick around to know what I was going to get. Predictably, the Elite won after overcoming a 4-match deficit. Oh, the courage they showed with all their flips and trampoline stunts. And, I mean, whatever. They have their little play toy belts back again to do whatever they so please with all their other friend groups. I'm sure that'll factor in the Dark Order at some point. Maybe the House of Drek. Hope to God they don't end up suckering Adam Page or Adam Cole into the mix. But who even knows at this point? But, at that point I said, the Jericho shit pissed me off enough. I knew I wasn't going to like the match anyway, so why bother subjecting myself to it? Even if it was the finale. I could sit here and vent about everything I hate about the Bucks or Omega style of match, but I've done it. We've all done it. If it's the kind of thing you like, cool. But for the people that like that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing those people like. There's no way of convincing those kinds of wrestling fans why this match or why this ring style sucks and why it doesn't work. But those people don't really have open ears. They don't want to hear it. They're going to like this stuff, and that's what it's going to be. So, whatever. Good that it was the finale. The first match they had at the Full Gear pay-per-view, which conveniently ended up being the first match in the series anyway. I remember watching that match, and that was enough to get me to realize I didn't need to see another 6 versions of it. So, cool. Good for them. I don't really know what this accomplished at the end of the day. Aside from giving the AEW diehards the kind of illogical ring style that they all come to know and love. But thank God it's over. I sort of blocked out the Elite from my viewing experience anyway, so it's not like I was really missing out on anything important. I will say, though, even if I wound up skipping through a lot of the second hour, the first hour of this program was one of the better showcases for Dynamite in a long time. While I still had some of my issues with the way things were laid out, I did not actively despise or loathe anything in the first hour. Maybe I removed some of the pre-tapes with the comedy relief that I mostly skipped over anyway, but it was a much better effort on their part. So I'll credit them where it's due. We'll see if this was a one-time thing or if they keep that momentum going into next week. But for 1 week, I thoroughly enjoyed what I saw from this week's Dynamite. And as we move on to our retro review, allow for me to just get my quick fuck you Peacock rant out of the way. For me, being completely unable to stream any of these classic shows on my computer, as I've been able to successfully do so since I created my account, now all of a sudden it's giving me problems for being able to stream anything on my computer through Peacock service. Thus, meaning I had to watch this on my tiny little iPhone. For that, I say, fuck you, Peacock, and your garbage streaming service. Fix your crap. And for those saying that it could be something on my end, trust me, I did all the troubleshooting I could. I even cleared out all my previous browsing data and basically tried to reset all my internet settings. Still not working. Therefore, I blame Peacock. I've had my share of issues with it before, but this one's particularly frustrating. And literally, it's just as simple as playback error. That's what it reads. Doesn't tell me what's wrong, doesn't tell me my internet connection is bad, doesn't tell me to log out of my account and sign back in again or restart my computer, which I did a dozen or so times. No, just reads generic playback error with a bunch of stupid codes and that stupid Puss in Boots character from Shrek giving me the sad face. I now hate Shrek because of it. Anytime I see a Pixar movie now, I'm going to be reminded of that stupid cat. I'm going to be brought back to how much I despise the Peacock streaming service. So way to go, guys. You ruined the Shrek movies for me. In any case, in viewing this episode of World Championship Wrestling on my extraordinarily small phone screen, we'll try and make do with what we got. It did not hinder my viewing experience, but my eyes were a bit sore by the end of it. Having to constantly squint at anything that was going on. But we're off to a great start here. 2 episodes into the Retro Review series, and it looks like I might have to watch the rest of these shows on my phone going forward. Ugh. If anyone has other recommendations for troubleshooting, feel free to chime in. Because right now I'm pretty much in the dark with what to do. Unless it's just something to do with the Chrome browser. Maybe it's not supporting it right now. And then in that case, I don't know how I update my browser because I'm pretty sure it's supposed to do that automatically. So, whatever. But, you know what brightens my mood more than anything whenever I'm having a bad day? Getting to see Ricky Morton in a fancy winter coat cutting promos. I'd love to get me one of those nice puffer jackets with the fur hoods. It's one of those classic coats that you can never go wrong with, and they never go out of style. Ricky Morton sporting it here in 1987 like a total badass. And, well, Ricky and Robert were out there to basically open things up and continue putting over their quest to become the World Tag Team Champions again. It's kind of a carbon copy of the last several promos they've done. Still claiming to be the only real R&R connection in the NWA. And whenever Paul Jones decides to grow a set, he can send his boys at Ricky and Robert for that title rematch. Promising by the end of 87, the Rock and Roll Express will be champions once again. And at that point, we cut to the ring for our opening contest. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin taking on Keith Vincent. And with a name like Keith, that's about enough to see someone want to punch that guy in the face. I mean, it is only the most unattractive name in the English language. So I've heard. That's pretty much what Garvin did to this poor chump. Got to admit, though, even though his name was Keith, the dude had some big biceps. He actually kind of looked like Manny Fernandez if he trimmed up the mullet. But, yeah, they wrestled for a few minutes. Garvin won with the brainbuster. I will always still appreciate Tony drawing attention to the fact that Precious sprays the air so that she can cleanse the area of any stenches, informing us that Garvin does not like it when people smoke in the arenas and all the debris gets in his hair, to which I asked, was that a thing people were still allowed to do back in the day? I know smoking regulations weren't as strict back then, but was that a thing people were allowed to do, smoking in live venues like that? People could still get away with that in the 80s? I mean, people used to smoke in restaurants all the time when I was growing up. That really wasn't abnormal, but man, smoking in live venues with all those people around? Ugh. I don't know. Gotta ask around about that. So after that, we cut to Superstar Bill Dundee at the booth, the Central States Heavyweight Champion, which is probably something that you would not have known if you were not paying attention to the storyline headed into Starrcade 86. I had completely forgotten about that until I saw him with the belt here, and I even watched Starrcade. But his classic Bill Dundee, if you recall, he wrestled Sam Houston for the title at Starrcade in one of the cities. I can't remember if it was Atlanta or Greensboro. But that match ended in disqualification with Houston retaining the title when he was still the champion. So, of course, His excuse for not having defeated Houston at Starrcade was that he was running a 176-degree fever, but he got back on his feet, managed to find a way to overcome the severe illness, and Jim Crockett was even so kind enough as to allow Dundee to change the nameplates so that the sides read Superstar. And pretty much his point with all this was to mock the fact that Dusty Rhodes did not have a belt and Bill Dundee did. And now that Dundee has a belt, after months of people not taking him seriously, now everyone's gunning for him. Yeah, they're gunning for that Central States Heavyweight Championship, a very prestigious regional title. I really wish they could have utilized Dundee more on Crockett TV in '87. He's been so great with what little interaction we've seen of him. Like the stuff with him and Buddy Landell at the end of last year, which was kind of short-lived. The stuff with him and Jimmy Garvin. Like, it's pretty low on the totem pole in terms of the way he's featured on the Superstation, but every time you see Dundee on camera, I just think, classic Memphis right there. Makes you wish you'd have more accessibility to a lot of those old tapes other than some of the stuff that's on YouTube right now. If only WWE could have saved up some of those old Memphis tapes and added that to the Peacock library. God, I'd be on cloud nine right about now. Well, as I sulk over that for a little bit, we can move on to talk about this NWA Pro pre-tape with the Midnight Express and Jim Crockett. And this is kind of an iconic segment here for '87, mostly for what it was setting up. Corny is back to sporting the yellow mustard blazer and tie, which was impeccably hideous in every way imaginable. And he's out there boasting about Big Bubba, saying he won the most recent Bunkhouse Stampede match, therefore he should be awarded the $100,000, since that would put him in first place in the seat of guys who won all the various Bunkhouse matches throughout December. And of course, Tony is smarting him up to the fact that Bubba is actually tied with Dusty in the record of most wins in Bunkhouse Stampede matches. But since Bubba technically won more money, Cornette believes that Bubba should be awarded the ultimate check. So in comes Jim Crockett to settle the issue. He informs Cornette that the individual who racked up the most wins in the Bunkhouse matches gets the check, not the individual who won the most money. Since Dusty and Bubba are now tied at first place, they're going to have a match in, ironically, my hometown of Pittsburgh. It's going to be a cage match on February 27th at the now former Civic Arena, which brought back a lot of nostalgia as soon as I heard that building get mentioned. And the added stipulation is that the only way to win is to throw your opponent out of the cage, whether it is over the top, out the door, or through the side. And with Corny being outraged over the scenario, he happily signs the contract for Bubba to face Dusty in said cage, saying that Bubba's going to wipe the mat with Dusty and win that check. And again, it's a pretty legendary match, historically speaking. Dusty and Bubba in the cage in Pittsburgh in 1987 at the Civic Center, also formerly known as the Mellon Arena, a building that used to sit approximately 10 minutes outside from my old home of Pittsburgh. And, while this segment was going on, I was pulling up some Google images of that building before they tore it down, and, oh God, what year was it? Was it 2009? 2010? It's been a long time now. What a beautiful building that was. They replaced it with the PBG Paints Arena, and I think the old location with the old arena is just parking lot now. But had some good times at that old Civic Center. Saw a lot of wrestling events there. I didn't get to see this live because I wasn't born, technically, for another 11 months. But my brothers were there. One of the best stories they ever told me was getting to see that show live. Same card as Flair and Nikita for the title, and I think I remember them telling me that was the first time they saw Lex Luger. Because again, Luger's debut is coming up soon too. That is so sweet. A live event that you'd think the average person would be like, Yeah, what's so special about that? But yeah, being able to recall those stories and listen to family talk about getting to actually attend those old shows, those are the moments you live for as a wrestling fan, dude. The round table dinner discussions. Great, great stuff. So then we cut back to the ring for Brad Armstrong versus Tommy Angel. And I think it was during this match where my audio and video got drastically out of sync for a little bit. I don't know what the hell happened, but the video was about 10 or 12 seconds ahead of the actual audio. It ended up fixing itself after one of those 30-second infomercials. But I guess it was going to happen. Taking place during a not-so-eventful match was probably the best-case scenario. It's kind of funny because had it not been for the fact that Armstrong was wrestling in red and Angel was in white, it probably would have taken me a minute or two to figure out which guy was which. Both guys had the exact same curly brown hair, almost the exact same shoulder length. Their statures and height were pretty similar. I mean, Brad was obviously the superior worker too, so it wasn't that hard to tell them apart. But it was fine for what it was. You know, Brad went over with the Russian leg sweep finish. Tony didn't mention it here, but during some point in the program, he was bringing up Bullet Bob and the fact that he would be returning to Crockett Promotions very soon. And, you know, they had left that one on the back burner from the TV match with him and Brad a month ago that they had with Dundee and Garvin. So, I mean, I was mentioning earlier how they weren't really doing a whole lot with Dundee around this point, but the stuff with him and the Armstrongs was really damn good. So maybe we'll see that feud continue in some capacity. So then we had Ron Garvin and Barry Windham out for a promo. Barry looking like he was ready to go golfing at the retirement home with that pink polo on. And, you know, Ronnie's out there running down the scene of events from last week, bringing up the Horseman attack on Barry, saying that he was on his way to the airport when everything was going down. To which I wrote, a likely story. But, you know, they replayed the whole fallout from Barry getting attacked following the Tim Horner-Tully Blanchard TV title match, basically leaving Barry for dead. And I like during this, you got Barry recapping the beating, talking about how he may have walked into the line of fire not thinking straight, but through all that, you got Ric Flair, the so-called World Heavyweight Champion, so-called. Tully Blanchard, the World Television Champion. Arn Anderson, the naked man without a belt to his name. And Ole Anderson, quote, I have no idea what his problem is, unquote. And then he immediately moves on to start running down JJ, totally dismissing Ole altogether. I just love the idea that of all things for Barry to come up with, for Ole, it's, I don't know what his deal is. I think I do. He was a very unhappy man. Still a badass in the ring. But out of all the members of the Four Horsemen during this period, Ole was definitely taking on the role of the grumpy drunk uncle. Then Barry told the Horsemen to step up and try to shut him down because he's got backup in case anything ever goes wrong. At that point, I wrote down, kind of like how you had backup last week when the Horsemen were beating your ass. And by the way, why was Ron Garvin catching a flight at the airport in 1987? Wasn't he a certified pilot? Unless he was going to the airport to fly his own plane, and in that case, why did he leave Barry at the building? All because Barry wanted to come out to scout a Tully Blanchard match later in the show? Ugh. I don't buy it. Something smells fishy to me. And it ain't superstar Bill Dundee, who happened to be in the next match. He wrestled Randy Barber. Some good classic heel stuff in this match. I will always love the heat tactic of toying around with the guy and paintbrushing him and then backing up to the ropes to cover up like a chicken shit. And then Dundee would wrestle the guy to the ground, work him over for a bit. And then he'd give him a slap to the back of the head and then back away again. And of course, the story is that Randy Barber would keep getting frustrated, but Dundee would always be able to outsmart him before he could do anything back. This is actually almost straight out of the playbook of Tully Blanchard's bag of tricks. Just going in there to fuck around with a guy and play mind games with him and managing to seal the win. We all know it's evident, but there are those split moments where you think, man, I really hope that guy turns around and punches that fucker in the jaw as hard as he can. Classic pro wrestling, man. So Dundee went over with the top rope leg drop, to which we then go over to the booth for Jim Cornette and Big Bubba. Corny not sporting the yellow mustard suit for this occasion. Bummer. And with perfect wacky delivery, Cornette begins going into a diatribe about how the Midnight Express are not on television this week because Eden and Condrey were called in as witnesses to a crime where apparently a man broke into a supply chain store, stole 25 toilet seats, and because the cops have nothing else to go on at the moment, it is up to Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey to provide as much detail as possible. And the best part of all of this, in classic Tony Schiavone fashion, Corny's going off on this bullshit story. Everybody knows it. And Tony nonchalantly turns to the camera while holding up the microphone, giving everybody at home the "you've got to be kidding" expression. And aside from that 15 seconds of fantastic television, Corny also mentions something about how the Midnights are going to be in Philly later on to wrestle the Road Warriors in what I believe will amount to their 383rd scaffold match in like 4 weeks. And I didn't ever really think about this until just now. Wasn't the entire idea behind the scaffold match designed to convince the people that somebody could die if they get thrown off a 25-foot platform? If we're also intended to believe that these two teams had somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20 of these damn matches in like a 4-week time span, doesn't that kind of kill the gimmick of the scaffold match? Realizing that the guys are not only surviving these matches every time they do them, but that they're also perfectly fine like 1 or 2 days later to just do it again in different cities? Or am I just overthinking this as a smart mark in 2023? Just asking. Anyway, I think Dusty was up next. I had to pause here in the show to do something, so my notes got a little jumbled. Speaking of jumbled, I had absolutely no fucking clue what Dusty was rambling on about for half this promo. All I remember are his facial expressions when trying to describe what it would look like trying to fit Big Bubba through a cage. Something about getting funky like a monkey in 1987. Something about the Horsemen not messing with chump change. And then he said hi to a bunch of family members. That was the extent of everything that happened. You know, I thought about this earlier when I was watching Dusty here. How many examples of wrestlers can you think of where you think, you know, I remember so-and-so being so amazing on the microphone, and then you look back at their promo material and realize, what the fuck was I thinking? Dusty's a weird animal. He's one of those dudes that I always remember him for having those like 1 or 2 legendary all-time promos. But the rest of the time I hear him talk, I find myself wondering afterwards, what the hell did he just say? And it's not like it's bad or anything, but it's so amusing to look back at an all-time great like Dusty Rhodes And then remember, like 80% of his promos were just a bunch of incomprehensible psychobabble. Just no fucking clue what the guy was talking about half the time. But not getting hung up on that fact, we had Nikita Koloff killing Larry Stevens in about a minute with the sickle. Wasn't he Larry Steven, singular, last week? Maybe I'm thinking of a different Steven. But, yep, that's all I got out of that. And then we had the most hilarious thing in the history of studio wrestling. Tony Schiavone trying to convince the people at home that Alan Martin actually had a chance to beat Tully Blanchard for the TV title. In under 25 minutes, mind you. Because after all, Tim Horner couldn't do it successfully last week. So surely Alan Martin has a snowball's chance in hell of doing so. Well, he did not succeed. Obviously, if you did not see last week's Superstation review, you're going to want to go back and check that out. Purely for the Tully JJ segments and the TV title match with Tully and Horner. But the short and sweet of it is, Tully and JJ decided to upgrade the challenge of the weekly TV title defense. In addition to the belt being at stake, Tully is now putting $10,000 of his own money on the line, and the only way for the opponent to win said money and title is by defeating Tully Blanchard in under the 25-minute mark. Now, because Tully is a giving man, he let Alan Martin get in some clean shots at one point. But of course, that lasted all of about 8 seconds before Tully cut him off, slapped him across the face, and then wound up beating him with the slingshot suplex in about another minute. Very surprising to hear that Alan Martin was slightly less competitive than Tim Horner from the previous week. But hey, maybe Dick Murdoch has a chance when they wrestle in Amarillo. I heard that was happening at some point. I mean, Murdoch only mentioned it like in 5 of his previous promos. But after that quick victory, we went back over to Flair and Tony at the booth. And for the most part, he really didn't have a whole lot to say. First, he put over Tully's win. Then he showed off his custom suit, which was, as I noted here, quite snazzy. And it was indeed custom made and tailor fitted. Then he started going off on Barry Windham, and that's where things got interesting, saying that he's out there running his mouth earlier about what he's going to do to the Horsemen, which promptly leads Flair to start doing one of his patented off-the-wall deals where he's trying to cut a promo while walking back and forth between the podium and the ring at the same time. Tony Schiavone is desperately trying to keep up with him, but he's also probably tripping over his microphone cord in the process. And somewhere in all this, Flair went off on Nikita, told him that he can flex and snarl all he wants, but it will never get him any closer to becoming World Heavyweight Champion. And I think I documented this as the beginning of the period in Ric Flair's career where he just decided, I'm going to make all of my promos as wacky and outlandish as humanly possible. Like, he had peaks and valleys throughout 86 where some of his promos were kind of off the wall. But by and large, he wasn't out there breaking blood vessels and turning beet red every single time he talked. Now I think he's starting to approach the Monday Night Wars level of crazy where every single time he cuts a promo, I either expect him to act absolutely insane or start taking flare flops in the middle of his promos. There was that one week that he practically did snow angels at the podium while ranting on Nikita. Now he's having Tony follow him around with a microphone while he just shouts shit off the top of his head, and half of it's barely picked up on camera. It only gets more out of control from here, people. Just wait until the late 90s when he starts cuffing himself to the ring ropes and stripping down to his underpants. That is the point of no return, right there. Then we came back from the break for a Tully promo. No JJ here, which was interesting. apparently having a meeting with Jim Crockett to discuss upcoming plans for Philly. Whatever that means. And Tully's taking a minute to put over the Horseman's attributes, saying that all members of the Horsemen, or saying that out of all members of the Horsemen, Ole's the one that's probably gone through the most struggle and hard times. Talking about the nights he used to work in bars, sweeping up floors, and just trying to make ends meet. But he's been in plenty of bar fights along the way, to which I wrote, of all guys in the original Horsemen that I would not have wanted to pick a fight with in a bar, Ole's the number one guy on that list. Tully and Arn, I would have assumed they probably just would have had a good time stretching me. Ric Flair, I could see him buying me a drink, because that's something Flair would do. Ole, I guarantee he would have just fucking snapped my neck, and that would have been it. Afterwards, he would have just gone on with life like nothing happened. But, getting back to this deal, Tully talked about his upcoming title defense with Dusty. Basically inferred that he's so confident that he can beat him in Philly, he might not even put the 10 grand on the line. But things got pretty great here. With Tully taking directly from the playbook of Rick, with acting all crazy and out of his mind, he starts recounting the Barry Windham incident from last week. And when Barry tried to argue the call at the end to get the decision reversed, the Horsemen all took matters into their own hands and left Barry in a heap in the middle of the ring. So Tully starts sprawling out in dead man's position on the ground to imitate the scene. Then he talks about how the Horsemen do this better than anybody in the business, whether it's sneak attacks or face-to-face altercations. That accounts for why they have the gold in the NWA. To which I responded with, well, 2 of the 4 Horsemen do. But I guess 2 out of 4 ain't bad? Question mark. And remember how I was mentioning earlier that Dusty's promos were always kind of hit and miss depending on the night he was having? I think Tully Blanchard might be a candidate for the single most underrated promo in wrestling history. I don't think I've ever heard a Tully promo on the Superstation that wasn't either great or stupendous. You know, even some of the lesser important promos, it still blows virtually everybody on the show out of the water. You know, and whether it's him playing off of JJ or just doing solo promos like he did here, God, this guy needs to run his own promo class. Nothing else. You know, he can let others handle the training or the wrestling school, but you want to get back to the basics. He needs to be hired to run promo classes. It's still astonishing to me that AEW had that guy under contract for 2 years and virtually got nothing out of the fucking dude. Holy fucking Blanchard. Wasted 2 years of him on television not doing anything. Now, I don't even know what his contract status is with AEW. If he's even still there, if he got banished to Ring of Honor purgatory. Either way, it sucks. So up next, we had exactly the following incident occur. The Rock and Roll Express getting molested by girls in the front row. Then going in there to beat Alan West and Eddie Roberts with a double drop kick in a match that went like an hour too long. Wasn't Alan West the guy who played the Batman in the superhero movies? Or, no, I'm thinking of Adam West. Yeah, this Alan West did not look like what you would call a superhero. Not with that hideous perm. And by the way, when I said that this match went way too long, like an hour too long, not only did it bleed through a commercial break, but they were actually giving West and Eddie hope spots. Christ, I don't even think the Mulkey brothers got hope spots with Ricky and Robert. And these guys are out here every week trying to tell Paul Jones that there's only one R&R connection in the NWA. You know, I'm watching them almost get pinned by Alan West and Eddie Roberts. No, but whatever. The girls all still shat themselves when they won. But you know who they didn't shat themselves for? Dick Murdoch doing another one of the most boring babyface promos of all time. I wrote nothing down except the following statement. Turn heel now. That is all you need to know. Then we had the Road Warriors squashing Ray Aaron and David Isley. And I think at this stage in the game, Tony Schiavone has the perfect reaction to every time the Legion of Doom storm in there to wreck shop. He just watches the decimation occur in real time and he goes, yep. And really, it's probably the most fitting response. I love this spot. Hawk tags in, and he goes to try and deadlift Isley into a modified Canadian backbreaker. And you can tell David Isley did not want to go up for this move. He's trying to potato Hawk at every turn. But as we know, after having watched many big men matches in wrestling, when big strong dudes are going to try to pick you up in the air and slam you, if you don't cooperate with them, fuck you. That's why I always love watching Faces of Fear matches in WCW, because the entire premise of Haku Barbarian matches were that they were going to go in there, they were going to pick some dudes up, they were going to throw them around for a while. And if you try to potato them at any point in the match, you were screwed. Because if they wanted to pick you up and throw you around, they were going to. So, Hawk's kind of struggling to get Isley over his back, but he muscled him up there, and then he just recklessly drops him, and Isley splats on the mat like a pancake. And like a minute later, Hawk and Animal do their double-assisted power slam off the top rope and get the pin. This was the epitome of, it is time for us to show off our muscles match. Big guys throwing littler guys around. Never gets old. A timeless attraction in the world of pro wrestling. Then after the break, we had the Road Warriors out for a promo, starting with Classic Hawk talking about how everyone in the NWA is a, quote, slug. And Hawk is sick of wrestling slugs. All he and Animal want to do is come in and beat up scum like the Four Horsemen and the Midnight Express, simply because they have no idea what it's like to live in the shoes that Animal and Hawk have had to live in. Which he then turns things over to Animal so he can basically challenge anybody in the NWA to a fight that thinks they can stand up to the Legion of Doom. And at the end I wrote down, whoever pissed in the Road Warriors Cheerios between last week and this week, hope they never find out who it was. We've seen some fired up, raging LOD promos before, but this one was quite boisterous. Hawk even kind of drew back from some of the hokier delivery than normal. He did make a comment about Jim Cornette's face, asking if that was his actual face or if his neck just threw up. That line was at least funny. There was also one point at the end where he kept dropping the word dirtball every 3 seconds. Because that's what he called the Midnight Express. I guess just to ensure that we heard him the first time. Either that or he was looking to sell some t-shirts. Then we went back to the ring for Barry Windham and Ron Garvin versus the Mulkeys. Speaking of the Devils, we were just talking about the Mulkey brothers a minute ago. And this is actually kind of humorous to me because so often is the case that I will sit here and bitch about the fact that modern wrestling has become just an endless stream of nonstop moves from beginning to end. How nothing has any psychology anymore. It's literally just move, 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 repeat. Literally, this match was nothing but moves. This was Garvin and Windham going out there and having a 5,000 moves match with the Mulkeys. Ron goes in there, hits Mulkey with a move, picks him up, hits him with another move, picks him up, chops him in the chest, picks him up, headbutts him, picks him up again, hits him with another move, and then he tags in Barry, and Barry hits the other Mulkey with a move, picks him up, hits him with another move, picks him up, hits him with another move, lather, rinse, repeat. And finally, after what I deemed the match of 10,000 moves, Barry hit one of the Mulkeys with a lariat and pinned him. I wrote down, Barry Windham and Ron Garvin were way ahead of the curve in 1987 with their let's just do a bunch of moves approach to wrestling. Of all the guys for the Beta Bucks to get their inspiration from, apparently they went back and saw this match at one point and said, we need to replicate that. Just more backflips and aerial stunts. You want to talk about the epitome of video game wrestling? This match. Now, granted, it was still 1,000 times better than most of the just moves matches I complain about today, but after it was over, I wasn't able to recall a single one of the other 4,999 moves except for the lariat that Barry used to pin the guy, and that was only because it was the finish. But, hey, you know what they say. Gotta have a little something for everyone. Maybe that's why Corny did what he did to Ronnie in a few weeks. The Midnight saw this match in the back and said, let's show this guy what real wrestling is. A little extreme if you ask me, but what can you do? So then coming back, we had Ivan Koloff out to take a minute to put over Vladimir Pietrov, insinuating that anybody that doesn't remotely fear Vladimir is either crazy or stupid, noting that the old Russian saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but the visual of Vladimir Pietrov portrays more than 1 billion words, to which they show a VTR of Pietrov beating up Tony Zane on NWA Pro, and I can assure you upon reflecting on this pre-tape, the visual of seeing Vladimir Pietrov beat up Tony Zane was not an example of a picture dictating 1,000 words. This was a picture that dictated one word. Green. They had Pietrov give Zane a second rope clothesline, to which I could not tell if that was supposed to be his version of the Russian sickle or just a very botched-looking clothesline. It was horrible either way, but they kind of sold the angle here that Pietrov's choke is another lethal hold that puts people on the shelf with drastic injuries. I guess that meant Tony had to be carted off to a local medical facility following Sunday's taping. But, that's all there really was to it. Ivan called Nikita a coward and told him to fight Vladimir one-on-one so that Russian justice can be served. And then we cut to the ring for the Big Green Machine, so he could fight Vernon Deaton and George South in a quick handicap squash. I guess their thought process here was, well, George South was a competent worker. Maybe he can go in there and make Vladimir look passable by just bumping for him. No. Pietrov gave South another terribly botched second rope clothesline and pinned him, to which the only thing I noted was, why would you beat George South when Vernon fucking Deaton is standing right there? I mean, no offense to the guy, but come on. Like, George South at least had a little bit of credibility to his name. But instead they had to beat him for some reason. Yeah. So far, this Vladimir Petrov fella really isn't impressing me a whole lot. Or maybe I was just kind of getting exhausted by the show at this point. So much so that I kind of blanked out during this Jim Cornette promo, which I know probably sounds like sacrilege. What do you mean you didn't pay attention to a Jim Cornette promo? Well, you know. To be fair, he didn't really have anything to say. His main point was that he vowed that the Midnight Express would become U.S. Tag Team Champions, which also meant that they were going to put Ronnie Garvin out of commission to make it happen. And we've already kind of alluded to the upcoming scene of events between these guys in the next several weeks, so I won't spoil anything too much. I did like his line at the end where he noted that When midnight falls on Garvin, it is going to be the darkest period of his life. Because not only is he going to be looking up at the stars without a belt to his name, but he might even be lying there in a neck brace or body cast once the Midnights get through with him. Good heel delivery. So then we came back for Ivan Koloff and Zane Smith, where the only thing I noted was how long it took me to actually figure out that Zane Smith and Tony Zane were two completely different people. At first, all I was paying attention to was the horrible fishy white physique. I went almost a full 2 minutes before figuring out, oh wait a minute, Tony Zane usually wrestles in short trunks, and Zane Smith had on long blue tights. Maybe someone should have figured out perhaps having two guys with the name Zane on our show is probably not a good idea. I guess I also should have remembered that they just shot the angle last week where Pietrov allegedly killed Tony Zane on a Sunday night taping. So seeing him back a week later to wrestle Uncle Ivan would have been a little odd. But yeah, Ivan won after about 5 minutes of relatively uneventful ring action. Pietrov got involved a few times on the floor, but there wasn't a whole lot of substance or oomph to it. Used to be a much bigger deal when Nikita and Crusher were the ones getting involved on the outside. Now they have Vladimir Pietrov, which I don't think even the studio fans were warming up to at this point. I think I see why this character was doomed to fail. On the subject of Nephew Nikita, though, he was out for a promo. Started off by running down Ric Flair and saying that he may be self-confident right now, but very soon he'll have to face Nikita again in the ring, and that'll be a different tale after Nikita gets done with him. But he quickly turns things over to Vladimir and Ivan, basically infers that they picked a fight with Nikita and Dusty, and they're ready for that fight. But he wants it face-to-face. No sneak attacks, no jump starts, no cheap shots. And soon we will all learn that Vladimir Pietrov isn't so big and bad. And, while I definitely don't think Nikita's intention was to say the quiet part out loud, noting that Vladimir Pietrov is not, in fact, all that big and bad, so far he doesn't appear to be wrong. But who knows? I mean, you got Ivan, Nikita, and Dusty in there, so maybe they can all cover up for the fact that this Vladimir Pietrov fella really didn't seem to know what he was doing. And then for our main event match, Dick Murdoch wrestled Brody Chase, won with the Brainbuster in the newest, most boring squash of all time. And then to close out the show, Ivan and Vladimir were back out to retort to Nikita's promo from a minute ago, continuing to try and assert that Nikita is afraid to get in the ring with Vladimir, that he knows Vladimir all too well, and what will end up happening should they get in the ring to face off. And this is hilarious because while Ivan is doing his damnedest to sell everybody on this promo, pointing out how lethal and intimidating this Vladimir Pietrov guy is, I think their intention was to keep the camera on him the whole time while Ivan was talking so we could see him look intimidating. I can think of many terms to describe what Vladimir Pietrov looked like during this promo. Intimidating was not one of them. He looked blank. He had that 1,000-yard stare going on the whole time Ivan was talking. The I am getting paid to try and be scary look. And apparently he took that to mean, let me just look into the camera and breathe very heavily. Yeah, this was no good. Ivan was great in the promo, but God, no offense to the guy. I am sure whoever this Al Blake guy was, sure he was a very nice dude, but him trying to portray a fake scary Russian here in 1987, that is exactly how it came across in execution. Fake. He looked like a guy trying to play a character. And that is not usually a good sign when you can see someone literally acting a role on television in pro wrestling. Not trying to rake the guy over the coals, but whoever signed off on him to come in and work this gimmick, maybe they could have kept searching a little more. That's all I'm saying. Speaking of failed gimmicks, that brings us over to this episode of World Class from January 14th, 1984. Not 94, as I wrote in my notes accidentally. Unfortunately, the company wasn't around by that point. Wherein, at the beginning of the program, it took Bill Mercer approximately 45 seconds before directing our attention to the missing link, saying, and I quote, "Here's a strange man." You don't say, Bill. And upon hearing that he was going to be wrestling Kerry Von Erich in the main event, the only thing I can think to myself was, poor Kerry. That was one of those unfortunate circumstances where they were probably piecing the card together, probably did a three-way rock, paper, scissors with the Von Erich brothers, and Kerry lost. Either that or maybe they drew straws, and whoever had the shortest straw had to wrestle Link. You can't win them all. That's what I say. We'll talk about that match later on, but first, we should talk about the highlights to this Ric Flair-David Von Erich World Title match from Reunion Arena. This was also taped on the Christmas Star Wars 83 event, and this is actually our first time reviewing it in any detail. And I know I've been sort of alluding to the upcoming events in early 84 for Dallas TV, most notably David's unfortunate passing in February. Again, it's something that kind of deserves a little more attention and greater detail, so I'll probably save that discussion for later on. But the whole setup to David getting involved in the heavyweight title picture was kind of strange. They had been running with the program with him and Flair over the NWA Missouri heavyweight title throughout 83, which around that time had kind of been seen as the secondary major singles title in the tri-state area. Traditionally, it was used as a belt to elevate somebody to eventually become the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. They did it with Harley, they did it with Flair, and, when they had David beat Flair for it in September, kind of seemed that the end goal was to eventually push David into having a run with the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. At the time, held by Ric Flair, although there was that brief period in 83 where Harley was the champion before dropping the belt back to Flair again. And that's kind of where the weirdness unfolds here, because they had done the Harley Race Kevin Von Erich title match in the summer of 83, and if you remember when we reviewed that match, Kevin had lost via DQ because David ran interference and tried to save his brother from essentially getting his arm ripped out of his socket. But they shot the angle where David laid out Harley and then stood over him holding up the belt, promising that he would become world champion. So, at the time, the program seemed to be setting up David feuding with Harley over the World Heavyweight title. And then Harley dropped the belt back to Flair sometime in late 83, and the Harley-David feud never really facilitated for the championship. But then we fast forward to December of 83. It's Flair and David for the NWA World Heavyweight title. I believe at this point, David was still technically the Missouri Heavyweight Champion, even though he never really carried the belt on Dallas TV and it wasn't recognized in that territory. But this match here was supposed to be the precursor to setting up that blow-off down the road between Flair and David for the belt. Probably with David winning it, because I believe in early 84, David ended up dropping the Missouri Heavyweight title anyway. So the writing was kind of on the wall at this point that David was being positioned for that run with the NWA World Heavyweight title. And while they didn't show the full Reunion Arena match here, they showed us essentially the highlight portion, which was everything that happened in the second half. David was working Flair over and getting several visual pins on him. So Flair tried to intentionally disqualify himself by throwing David over the top rope to the floor. And of course, David Manning wasn't having any of Flair's bullshit on that. So he ran Flair up the flagpole for a minute and told him that the match is going to continue. Figuring at that point, well, all right. So obviously Flair trying to get himself DQ'd isn't going to fly when the babyface referee David Manning is calling such a high-profile title match. Well, here's what happened. David locks in the claw on Flair. Flair at this point gigged himself so that his head was split wide open. And while Flair's trying to crawl toward the ropes, he reaches out to the announce table and grabs one of the ringside microphones to smack David over the head with it. And, well, after seeing David Manning not disqualify Rick, after seeing him throw David Von Erich over the top earlier, surely Flair hitting David with a microphone isn't going to be a DQ either, correct? Wrong. Apparently. No, I guess the logic here was you cannot get disqualified for purposefully throwing a guy over the top rope, but you can, in fact, get disqualified for hitting a guy with a gimmick while the match is in progress. David had no choice but to disqualify Ric Flair for using a weapon in plain view, but him throwing David Von Erich over the top rope illegally in plain view, that is apparently not grounds for disqualification. I failed to see the logic here. Something didn't really tally up with that finish. But as I noted a minute ago, this was kind of the catalyst that launched this feud into the next gear. You know, over the next several weeks of TV, we're going to see a lot more interaction between Flair and the Von Erichs to keep the feud fresh and exciting. Unfortunately, the end result isn't exciting, because as we know, by February, pretty much a month out from this point, David Von Erich's gone. And that title rematch never came to fruition. It's really kind of sad when you think about it, because when you look at it historically, this was kind of David's last big match before his death. I don't know if he wrestled on any of the other tape shows between now and early February, but this match at the Christmas Star Wars event in '83 was really one of David's final big matches. You know, while we can only really speculate when or where that title rematch was ever supposed to happen, you look back here after it's over and realize, damn, this was kind of David's unexpected send-off. From everything we saw here, it was a good match. Crowd was super electric for everything that happened. You could really tell they were craving that title change. It's just unfortunate how everything went down. Can you imagine how electric the building would have been had David actually won the title? My God. Would have been one of the biggest pops in wrestling history. Well, we'll try to stay on a positive note here as we move on with the show, because we still have some more David material to talk about in the next couple of weeks or so. It's not all a tragedy. Also not tragic, Buddy Roberts sporting a bleach blonde crew cut. Looks like a total badass with that short hairdo. It took him about 6 months to finally grow the hair back, but now he doesn't have to go around wearing a gimmicked helmet. Even though the helmet was still one of the highlights of Dallas TV in '83, seeing all the babyfaces try to go after Buddy's wig in every match. Anyway, they set up that the Freebirds had won back the six-man tag team championship trophy. And whereas with NWA World Championship Wrestling in '87, where I'm constantly having to remind myself who the six-man tag team champions were at the time, Dusty and the Road Warriors, because they never carried the trophy out on television, so how's anybody supposed to know? At least Buddy had the trophy with him here. Now, of course, this is all interesting because following the stipulations of the Michael Hayes-Kerry Von Erich cage match, where Hayes lost, and Terry Gordy also taking the fall in the tag match with Buddy going up against Mike and Kevin Von Erich, both Terry and Hayes were barred from World Class for the entirety of 1984. So the obvious question is, how did the Freebirds wind up winning back the six-man titles? And the answer is very simple, in fact. They went to Atlanta, a fair, impartial state, and they won the titles back, knowing that they were going to get a fair shake that time. Can't really argue with that logic. And of course, we all know that we were going to get to relive the moment of Michael Hayes portraying Santa Claus in that great angle from TV last week. So they kind of show that all again. The deal with Hayes turning on the Von Erichs, hitting David with the pile driver, and then running to the back like a scalded dog. This time, while the video was playing, Mercer was kind of working the role of disappointed uncle by admonishing the Freebirds for destroying the spirit of Christmas for all the young kids. We all know that Santa is the man that brings happiness and cheer to everybody each Christmas season. And here the Freebirds are making a mockery of the whole situation for their own gain. And man, you want to talk about ways to draw sympathy on Santa Claus and make him the biggest babyface in the world? Mission accomplished right here. Now I want to see the real Santa come back and kick Michael Hayes' ass. Speaking of the devil, we had Hayes on the phone line in Atlanta to cover a handful of things. The first of which was pointing out that he preferred the phone call after the last time Bill Mercer brought the camera crew to his home in Georgia and did nothing but irritate him. And I had actually forgotten all about that little deal until I remembered the visuals of the Freebirds playing pool and smoking cigars while Bill Mercer was trying to act all serious and conduct an interview. That was actually pretty fun television. But Hayes talked about them having 48 different states and 70 plus other countries to decide where they want to defend the six-man titles. He also talked about several things that were bothering him as of late, up to and including how people have interpreted the way the Freebirds started feuding with the Von Erichs. Hayes insists that he handed the belt to Kerry on a silver platter at Star Wars 82 in the cage, and he refused it, so that's where they stand at the moment. And all the conspiracies Mercer's tried to drum up over the last year has cost the Freebirds titles, matches, and big moments. So everyone can consider what happened last week a return of the favor. And to kind of close everything out here, Buddy just recapitulated a lot of what Hayes said, noted that they stick together no matter what. But of course, Mercer's assertion is that Buddy he just does whatever Hayes tells him to do because he's a lapdog. Oh, the sarcasm on these classic shows are too much sometimes. So at that point, we went to the ring for our next contest at the actual arena. Sportatorium, by the way, not the reunion arena in Fort Worth. It is Buddy Roberts versus Johnny Mantell, which I really didn't have a whole lot to say about if I'm being honest. Mercer mentioned the thing that I talked about with Buddy a few minutes ago, the fact that his hair is starting to grow back in full. He was also still incredibly dejected at the visual of Michael Hayes desecrating the name of Santa Claus. The one man you never fuck around with during the Christmas season, and Hayes crossed the line. Anyway, this is one of those standard prelim world-class matches where they go the 10-minute Broadway. Ironically enough, also a match where you could say they gave it plenty of time, and by the end of it, I really couldn't tell you a whole lot that happened. Not for lack of paying attention or anything, it was just a relatively boring, uneventful match. They traded some spots for a while, Buddy did some of his classic stalling tropes, and they built to the end where Mantell got a couple near falls on Buddy, but right when he got him trapped in the small package, the bell rang to signify the end. Not really a whole lot else to say about it. After this, though, we were intended to get a Black Gordman versus Chris Adams match, but before the ring intros, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Precious came out to interrupt for a Heat promo. Jimmy's going off on the fact that the American Heavyweight title was held up recently due to the controversy of their last match, but Jimmy's calling out Adams for a rematch right now so they can settle the score. But before he turns away, after he calls Adams a chicken. He sucker punches him in the gut, and he lays him out with a delayed vertical suplex in the middle of the ring. At first, I was wondering, did he just fuck up the brainbuster, or was that intended to be a vertical suplex? And factoring in what happened just a few minutes later, I think I see why they went with the delayed vertical over the brainbuster spot. Because if there was ever a time to make Black Gordman look like the single biggest fucking doofus on the planet, this was the match to make that happen. Get this. Besides the hammering. Garvin lays out Adams with a suplex. Adams is down selling on the mat for a minute or so. Gordman is just kind of hanging out in the periphery, playing with his dick for a while. And when they ring the bell, 5 seconds later, Adams counters an Irish whip off the ropes, stacks up Gordman in a schoolboy, and pins him. Wherein directly afterwards, Garvin and Gordman teamed up to stomp a mud hole in Chris Adams. And, yeah. Talk about doing everything he can to cut Black Gordman's balls out from under him. Couldn't even beat a guy that literally just got laid out with a signature move like 15 seconds prior. There's a term for that. It's called geek. But that brought us to our main event, finally. As advertised, it was intended to be the Missing Link versus Kerry Von Erich. But while Skandar Akbar and Link were coming down the aisleway, Link ended up jump-starting Kerry and blindsiding him before the introductions. And he's pounding away and beating the crap out of poor Kerry. Kid can't even defend himself. Didn't even get a chance to take his robe off. And finally, out come David and Kevin to kind of level the playing field a little bit to help out their brother. And he's out there selling and trying to recuperate for a minute or so. But we all know the Von Erichs aren't going to back down from a fight. So even if Kerry's got to go in there at 50% to carry the Missing Link to a semi-watchable main event TV match, by God, he's going to give it the old college try. So the question is, did it work? Well, yes and no. Was it semi-watchable? Yeah. But does semi-watchable necessarily mean it was a good match? No. Now, of course, the Dallas fans always manage to take a match that probably feels like a 2 on paper and make it a 10 by the end. I mostly spent the majority of this match contemplating how Bill Mercer never wrote a book called The Missing Link, A Strange Apparition. Every 3 seconds, he's mentioning something about the strange, bizarre nature of the missing link. But he's always got to use the word apparition. I'm like, you know the guy's not dead, right? What is he, Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures? Trying to act all scholarly with his sentence structure? Sounds like me at times. Anyway, what the hell happened here? Well, they did the deal on the floor where Kevin started chasing Akbar around because he tried to swipe at Kerry's foot at one point. So Akbar ends up getting into the ring to try to shield himself behind the Missing Link while Kevin and Kerry are trying to get at him. All of which automatically winds up throwing the match out for a double DQ. And that was kind of all there was to the match. And while Mercer's plugging next week's program, he also got in his one line about the Missing Link being a strange apparition. And at that point, I began furiously pouring a glass of bourbon to make up for all the missed shots I could have taken. Anytime Mercer mentions Link and the word apparition, take a shot. I would have been dead in week 1. So hopefully that means no more Missing Link on world-class television. That way I can save both my sanity and my liver. But I'll tell you who I am looking forward to seeing next week. Andre the Giant. He's going to be teaming up with the Iceman to wrestle the Super D's. That'll be a fun time. Getting to see Andre back in the fold on Dallas TV. It's been a while since we've seen him. And man, looking back here, this would have been right before he went to the WWF, right? Because Andre had been doing some of the New Japan touring in the early 80s, but he wasn't ever locked down to a specific territory around that point. He was the ultimate free agent. But by 84, Vince Sr. had already sold the company to Vince Jr., and they were right in the midst of expanding the company. And Andre was one of the most highly sought-after attractions at the time. So, yeah, I think this would have been right before they signed him. And Andre was already a megastar before the WWF run, too. But getting to see him for probably a one-off appearance, that'll be kind of cool. Anyhow, that should probably suffice for now, don't you think? With all that background ruckus going on, this podcast is going to fucking blow. I was actually quite content with what I saw this week in wrestling, though. Like I mentioned before with AEW, if they do more shows like the one I saw on Wednesday, 2023 is shaping up to be a promising year for them. Granted, I don't expect that to last. So often is the case with a company like AEW where you'll get a good show here and there, and then they'll usually follow it up with the norm, as I constantly like to say. And it's like, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm just going by track record, man. And generally, I'd probably say that's my one hope to latch onto for the company going forward. You know, there have been so many peaks and valleys for this company in the last 3 years, and I'd probably say that from the point that all the drama started going down with the EVPs and Punk, the whole fallout to the media scrum, leading up to where we were toward the end of late last year, I don't think there was ever a time where I was more down on the product. The shows were just not good. Borderline atrocious by all accounts. All I'm hoping for is that the one I saw this past week wasn't an anomaly. If they can do similar shows like that more often, I'll be much happier. But we'll see if they've managed to finally find their footing, or if that was just a happenstance to book a relatively good episode of Dynamite for a change. So, with that, we will be back on Monday to see what the WWF or WWE holds in store. To be honest, my attention is more concentrated on the WWE side of things at the moment. The whole development in the Vince McMahon potential company buyout story, it's kind of blowing AEW out of the water right now in terms of relevancy. Granted, that might not be a good thing for WWE in the end. The one thing you heard a lot of people talk about the fact was when Vince stepped down as CEO last year, it was one of the single worst things that Tony Khan could have possibly have had happened. Because with Vince out of the picture, there were a lot of wrestling fans that were constantly checking out the WWE and just trying to see how things were going to operate without any jurisdiction from Vince. You know, Hunter had brought back a lot of the guys Vince fired. There seemed to be a general positive aura surrounding the company, both internally and externally. You know, and even if the AEW diehards are going to watch no matter what, there are still a good handful of AEW viewers out there that'll still watch and find interest with the WWE product when it's good. Things were very promising when Vince quietly went away for that 6 or 7 month period. Now with him back again, the morale in the company isn't quite as high. You know, I've even read rumors about top stars threatening to step down if the company winds up getting sold to the Saudis. I mean, which I know is still a rumor, only at this point. And I don't know how much of that story carries water. I mean, you always got to watch what dirt sheets you're getting your sources from, but I wouldn't say that's all that surprising to hear. You know, the whole relationship with Saudi Arabia has always been a troubling situation with a lot of employees and talents in that company. But the fact remains, WWE does great business with them. If the Saudis are willing to plunk in somewhere in the $4 to $5 billion range to buy the company, regardless of whether or not we think it's a good idea, it's an investment that I know Vince would be comfortable in making. And I mean, I trust Vince's inclination over the average Mark, who really doesn't know shit from apple butter when it comes to the finances or inner workings of the business. They might claim they know. They don't. So we'll definitely keep our eyes peeled for that groundbreaking story. I wouldn't be shocked if something came out in the next few weeks in terms of news. But in the meantime, we'll just keep trudging along in the reviews. The on-screen product is primarily what I'm hoping to see improvement in, because the last couple SmackDowns have been absolutely putrid. But we'll find out how long it takes before the entire state of the wrestling business gets flipped upside down. Wherein now it'll be AEW's television show that I'll be looking more forward to seeing than WWE's. Never thought that conversation would come up again. But I've rambled enough for now. So thanks for watching, everybody. When I come back next time, there won't be people pounding on fucking walls like that. Anyway, take care. Peace out.